Hello and welcome to my 500 subscribers special Q&A. I'm a bit late, but that's okay. Better late than never, right? That's a saying. So I'm going to be answering some of your questions. The gimmick, I'm not sure if I would call it a gimmick, but the general idea is that I'm going to be going over more personal questions, whereas last time it was more related to my channel or anime and manga. So yeah, before I get started, where did I put that? There you are. I need something to help me get a little inspired to answer these questions. I've looked over the questions, but I haven't given any thought to them. My goal is to be as authentic as I can here and come up with some answers in the moment. To help me do that, if you're underage, this is a inspiration inhaler. Yeah. If you're overage, you probably know what it is. Whatever, don't worry about it. So let's get started. Alright, so, up first. At nbodo222 asks, what's your favorite color? So, my favorite color is, I'm colorblind, first of all, so, you know, I don't think about colors a whole too much, but my favorite color would be, so, it might technically be two colors, but I'm gonna say it's one color. So the color happens when you have a bright blue sky, and the sun's shining down, right? And you've got leaves, and then the color that it makes when you look up into the leaves, and it's like that light green with the sun shining through against the blue. Perfect. Next question. At Elijah Kai VA, what do you think about the issue of representation in media? Do you think it's blown out of proportion? Do you think representation is very important, or somewhere in between? So, representation in media, I think there's like two parts to it, right? I've got a cat, as you can tell. So the first part is just what characters are in it. Like, is it all straight white people? Are there other groups being represented? It doesn't seem like an issue to so many white people don't see it as an issue because it's just like the norm. It's not thought of as a thing. And to be able to see yourself in the story is a really huge part of storytelling, right? Like, that's part of what people like about stories a lot of the time. And I'm not saying that you can't see yourself in a character that doesn't hold your same, like, race or religion or sexuality or gender or whatever. You can still see yourself in other characters, and at the same time, if all you see is characters that don't look like you, I think that doesn't sound like a nice feeling. Like, I think that everyone should be able to have a bunch of characters that they see that are like them. So that's the first part. The first part is just what characters are in it. The second part is how they're represented. So, like, if you've got, like, a story where there's, like, one not white person and they're the villain, right? Probably not I'm not saying you can't do that, but you gotta be careful, because if all you're showing with your representation, if everyone who isn't the quote norm is, like, either based on stereotypes or evil or whatever, that can be a problem as well. So it's not only about having characters that aren't white, it's about, I think with any character, approaching them as a character before approaching them as an idea of what a certain person would be like, I think that's the way to go about it. So, like, I don't know if I even have the right to talk about how to write characters that aren't, I can talk about writing characters that aren't cis, because I'm going to talk about that. So, like, if you're a cis person, you're not trans, and you want to write a trans character, I think the first thing to do is just to think of them as a person. Just don't be like, alright, I've got a trans character, I need to make them, like, real trans or whatever. Just, it can be nice to ask around, figure out, what kind of struggles do people in this group face? What are some internal dialogues that go on? What are some reactions to how they're treated in society? Like, ask around, get informed. Don't run on assumptions. I think that's the biggest thing. Don't run on assumptions. So, treat them as a person, ask around, see what the deal is. So, in the question of how important representation is, I think it's super important. Because if you don't think about it, then every character will just automatically go to the quote norm. So I think it's very important to keep it in mind at the very least. So yeah, next question. Do you think Guts should run for president? And in an ever-changing landscape, what is the best advice you want anime fans to know about surviving this crazy leftist and right-wing constant fighting? So the first question, of course, Guts for president, obviously. I don't think he's old. I don't think he's old enough because I think he's like 34 or something. But whatever, it's Guts. So the meteor question here. What is my advice for surviving this crazy fight between left and right? So I think the first thing to think about, and this might seem obvious, but it also might not, I'm not sure, is that everyone's a person. And now, just because everyone's a person doesn't mean that everyone's entitled to believe absolutely anything and act on it if those beliefs and actions end up causing harm to others, is my personal thought on it, right? So I don't think of it necessarily as a right versus left issue, because honestly, there are a ton of people on the left, like the Democratic Party, that are absolutely corrupt and are only looking out for their best interests. So like, yes, the right has made a platform that is based, that there's a lot of oppression in it. And at the same time, I would say that the left, or at least Democrats, are like a diet version of that. It's not much better. So instead of thinking of it as like a left versus right issue, I think of it as an issue of people that want change in a direction of equality, or at least equity, versus people that want to stay stagnant. And there are definitely a larger number of people with that attitude on the right. And at the same time, a lot of people like that on the left. So I think it's about approaching things in a human way. And now, in terms of like solving the issue, that's pretty beyond me. I'm struggling with that. I don't know. And I don't think any individual can solve big issues like that. I think it's about staying informed, finding the line between informed and overwhelmed, because a lot of it can be very overwhelming and intense. And at the same time, doing nothing is siding with not changing. So if you believe that things should change and that people should be treated equally, then you should just find people on Twitter that feel the same way, find people on social media, look out for things you can do, email your alderman, email your congresspeople, whatever, email everyone, call, whatever, text. There are things you can do. Just look around. I'll put some resources in the description for that. But I think instead of thinking of it as left versus right, thinking of it as change versus stagnation. Okay, next question. At 98kuma_Kuma, how do you view freedom, and what drugs have you done and how they affected your worldview? Okay, so I'll start with the first one. How do I view freedom? It's a very, very, very abstract question. And Vagabond actually has made me change my mind a lot about how I feel about freedom. I used to think of freedom as just being untethered and doing whatever I want, basically. So I used to think freedom is the ability to do anything. But now, after reading Vagabond and ruminating on the idea of freedom for a bit, I think it's less about the belief of doing anything or the ability to do anything, and more about thinking what you can do as who you are. So I'll speak for myself here. I think of freedom as I am who I am. I have my weaknesses, I have my strengths. There are some things that I just can't do. And what I need to do is see what it is that I can do and how it is that I can impact the world in a positive way, and just allow that to naturally happen. Just put myself into that direction and think with that mindset. And that's how I think of freedom now, as finding what only I can do. So everyone's so unique and different, and has a different experience, has a different lens on the world, and finding a way to take that individual lens and that one special part of you that exists. Maybe not one part, I mean, we're all multifaceted, right? So finding the parts of you that can inspire change and can move yourself forward in a way that hopefully impacts the world positively. And we'll all do things that impact the world negatively. That's sadly just everyone makes mistakes or makes a decision where someone will get hurt, and that's just reality. And at the same time, accepting everything as it is, and also seeing what we can do, I think that's freedom. And the second part, what drugs have you done and how have they affected your worldview? Well, I've smoked weed, obviously. And I have very mixed feelings about it. Because on one hand, I mean, it brought me closer to people that radicalized me and really widened my worldview. So that's a positive. And on a negative, I pretty quickly became dependent on it and used it as a way to cope with existence. And so now my whole mindset on surviving has changed. It's like, can I survive without substances versus, like, do I need to? Which is not a mindset I like having, and I feel like it impedes my freedom. So, simultaneously, weed has widened and constricted my existence. So, I think whether you should do drugs, I mean, I don't think anyone should do the more intense stuff personally. I mean, if you do, I'm not judging you, and like, I'm not gonna tell you what to do. But things like, you know, I'm terrified of things like coke and heroin and all that. And as a jazz musician, there are just so many people in my field that have sadly passed away because of substances like that. So I think those things are scary, and obviously it's a way that some people use to cope with existence. So anyone who's either recreational or uses those to survive and exist, if you're in either of those positions, I don't think you're a bad person, and I think that drugs are usually, when they're more intense, are usually coming from a place of craving or needing something and filling it with that, so I can't blame anyone. I feel like I'm going in circles here. But yeah, widened, constricted, all of that. I haven't really done much else. I did shrooms once, hated it. It wasn't for me. I know I seem like the kind of person that, I mean, I'm usually wearing like bright paisley and floral. People assume that I'm into psychedelics, but not really. If you're using those to widen your existence, go ahead. I'm not gonna tell you not to. But they're, look into what make sure you're prepared and consider the safety aspect of it. And if you're young, just don't mess with your brain. It'll be later. My brain is so much slower now because I started this when I was young. So, wait a while. No rush. You got plenty of time. Feels like there's not a lot of time when you're young, but there's a lot of time. So just, it's okay. Last question, which is the widest one actually. At Ginkgo Taku asks, do you think there's a meaning to life? And if yes, what meanings have you derived from it? So, this is very connected to my ideas on freedom, actually. Well, first of all, I should say that I am an optimistic nihilist. So, I don't think that there's anything inherent in terms of meaning to the universe. I don't think that there's, one path that is correct. And I think that opens us up to creating our own meaning and finding our own meaning. So, I'll speak for myself because I can't speak to anyone else's meaning. But the meaning I've found in life is that I can continue to live and add positivity. And that sounds kind of, what I think of as positivity isn't just yeah, you're doing great. But accepting a more wide and accepting view of things. I think a big part of my meaning is always to be widening my perspective and always be taking in new information and never stagnating and believing that I know how things work and how the world works, because everything I know is based on what has happened to me already, not what will happen or what could happen or what else exists all over the world. So I try not to think that I know what's going on all too much. And at the same time, I think in my pursuit of widening and believing that I don't know things, I have learned a lot, and I think I can share a lot of my experience that I've gotten from that. And that's part of what I want to do. I want to always be creating something that I don't know if helps people widen their perspective is the right way to say it, but gives other people the opportunity to come into contact with points of view that they maybe haven't already. And maybe discover more on my own as I'm doing it. So, yeah. Thank you for watching my Q&A. I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye. Oh, and before I go, thank you so much, 500 subscribers. That means a lot to me. Yeah, I appreciate all of you. You're great. I'm always surprised that numbers go up and happy about it. And yeah, so goodbye part 2.